Hi, everybody.
Welcome. I'm Julie Dobrow, a member of the Tisch College faculty. I'm also on the faculty at the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development and the Film and Media Studies program. And I'm delighted to be welcoming you all to, believe it or not, our 17th Murrow Forum on Issues in Journalism. Today's program is sponsored by Tisch College's Solomont Speaker Series with support and collaboration from the English Department and the Film and Media Studies program. I also want to thank Mark Duffy and Taylor Phillips at CNN for their assistance with our program today. Very special word of thanks to Dan Santa Maria, Sally Johnson, and Alexandra Bush at the Tufts Archival Research Center for pulling together some of the Murrow materials that we were able to view before the event today. Tufts, for those of you who don't know, is home to the largest collection of Edward R. Murrow's materials. There are many important and fascinating papers to view in the archives. Also, special shout out to Dean Dana Cunningham at Tisch College for her support of this event, and also to my wonderful colleague, Jessica Burns, who does so much for all of the amazing events that she organizes for Tisch College that enrich the entire Tufts community. I'm very pleased to bring you all greetings from the Murrow family, who have passed along their appreciation that Tufts has continued to highlight the vital role that journalists play in our society. Ed Murrow and his collaborators knew that journalism works best when everyone's voice is heard. The Murrow family believes that Ed Murrow would be proud to see that conversations like we have in the Murrow Forum are alive and well, assuring a healthy debate about the state of contemporary reporting and encouraging aspiring journalists to join the profession. In our Murrow forums over the years, we've been privileged to have some of the most well-respected print, broadcast, and digital journalists grace this stage, as well as politicians from both sides of the aisle, biographers, and screenwriters whose work has touched on aspects of Murrow's life and legacies. Edward R. Murrow was among the most renowned figures in the history of American broadcast journalism. His work on radio and television for CBS reshaped the American media landscape. Today, we still look upon Murrow as the standard bearer for much of journalism. His stellar interviewing skills, his eloquence, and his tenacity continue to inspire new legions of journalists in a digital age of reporting. Indeed, Ed Murrow's insistence that journalism should open doors for many voices and that journalism must be dedicated to uncovering truths, however difficult they may be, seems all the more relevant in this world that we have today. In the Murrow tradition, I am so very pleased to welcome back Neal Shapiro. Neal has had a long and distinguished career in journalism as an award-winning producer and media executive with a 3-decade career spanning print, broadcast, cable, and online media. He's currently CEO of the WNET Group in New York City, the largest public media enterprise in the United States. With Channel 13, WLIW 21, that's hard to say, and the network New Jersey PBS, the WNET Group reaches approximately 9.5 million viewers per week. The WNET Group produces such acclaimed series as Great Performances, American Masters, Secrets of the Dead, and my very favorite, Nature, as well as a range of documentaries, children's programs, news, and other cultural offerings on air and online. Since joining WNET in 2007, Neal has dramatically increased national and local programming, set new fundraising records, and opened new state-of-the-art studios in Lincoln Center and in Newark, New Jersey. But before making his mark on the world of public media, Neal had a considerable career in the world of news. He served as president of news at NBC, a job he began shortly before the terrorist attacks of 9/11. Prior to that, he served as the executive producer of Dateline NBC, a show that he resurrected and built up to be one of the most awarded television news magazines in history. For his television work, Neal has received 32 Emmys, 31 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and 3 Columbia DuPont Awards. But aside from all of the awards, one of Neal's greatest distinctions, and I know the one of which he is most proud, is that he is a jumbo. Neal graduated magna cum laude from Tufts in 1980 with degrees in history and political science. He's taught journalism here at Tufts and at the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. He's lectured at many universities around the country. Neal has also served on the Tufts Board of Trustees and now serves as a trustee emeritus, where he continues to make valuable contributions to this university in so many ways. And of course, the other Tufts distinction that Neal holds, and another one I know of which he is most proud, is that he is also a Tufts parent. I have long been a fan of today's special Murrow Forum speaker. I listened to Audie Cornish on WBUR starting in 2002, where her insightful and sensitive reporting on the legislative battle in Massachusetts over same-sex marriage, the Catholic clergy sex abuse scandal, and other major news stories was frequently featured. I listened to Audie when she moved over to NPR's national desk in 2005, reporting from Nashville, covering the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana and other news in southeastern United States. I continued to listen to Audie Cornish when she joined the NPR politics team in Washington to cover the 2008 presidential race and the historic election of President Barack Obama. Named host of Weekend Edition Sunday in 2011, she earned a George Peabody Award for her work with the StoryCorps 9/11 project. And in 2020, the National Press Foundation recognized Audie's work with the Sol Taishoff Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism. Her feature reporting on the opioid crisis in Baltimore earned a Salute to Excellence Award from the National Association of Black Journalists. I also followed Audie Cornish when she became co-host of NPR's flagship program, All Things Considered, from 2012 to 2022. And I have avidly followed her move over to CNN, where she is an anchor and senior analyst. I do my morning exercises every morning, watching Audie as she hosts CNN This Morning with Audie Cornish on weekdays from 6 to 7 a.m. on CNN and CNN International, and a weekly CNN podcast, The Assignment with Audie Cornish. This podcast, The Assignment, was named Best Interview Podcast at the 2023 Ambience Awards and Best News and Politics Podcast at the 2023 Black Podcasting Awards. Audie once said in an interview with her alma mater, UMass Amherst, that one of the things that drew her to journalism was being able not just to walk into the center of a room or a story, but walk up to the front. Through her admirable career, Audie Cornish has demonstrated that she's walked not just to the front of the room, but all the way up to the front. Audie, on behalf of Tufts University, I'm so pleased to welcome you and thank you for being our featured journalist in this year's Edward R. Murrow Forum.
Audie, so glad you're here and welcome to the front of the room.
Well, thank you for that hype. I need to bring you to all the events. This is amazing. And thank you for being a morning person. I am not. So I love that you're exercising and watching. This is great.
So, all right, we have a lot to talk about today, but I thought in the beginning we could just talk a little about what the contemporary issues are right now that you face as a journalist. How different is it, or is it not that different, to be covering news in the age of Trump?
I mean, it's been a long time that we've been in the age of Trump now. So it's that question is not maybe as loaded as it was in 2016 or 2015 when it was really confusing for people. I'll put it this way. There were a lot of rules that journalists abided by that were born post-Watergate. Watergate happens. It is this real paroxysm for the culture. And the rhythm of it was a little bit of like you uncover, the audience responds, there is consequence. That model does not work now, period. And so that is thing I think a lot of journalists were wrestling with. There were all kinds of rules they had sort of abided by informally. And that also went for politics with Trump as well, even politics within the Republican Party. There were certain things that you did not do. And then when someone would be like, oh, is that like a law? And it was like, oh, no, it's just the way it's done. And then he just didn't do it. And then what was the consequence? Well, it wasn't backlash from the voters. So then what is there? So I think it really took a while for people to reckon with the shift in that Watergate era thinking of what their journalism was going to do.
And how much of that do you think is informed by the changing world of journalism? And I'll ask you in this way. In Watergate, and I grew up during Watergate, right? That got me to journalism. There were 3, 4 networks, right? There were a couple of major American papers. There were a couple of wire services. And that was it, right? You couldn't surround yourself as you can now with lots of media, often that reinforces your point of view.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wondered, how much do you think part of the reason that has changed is because there are less few arbiters of truth. There are so many different avenues. Do you think that's a part of the reason?
Say that again.
In Watergate, right, there was only so many scorekeepers.
Okay.
When the president's wrong, the media's aligned, he's wrong,
Yeah.
right? Now, whatever the president says, there are many people, even that some people think are wildly outrageous and wrong. And there's a whole network which will say, no, he's
Yeah.
absolutely right. So how much of that is in terms of the consequences?
You know, this is actually an interesting week to be talking about this because of the battle with the Pope. Okay. And because this will seem unrelated, the sex scandal involving Eric Swalwell, the Democratic candidate for governor in California. So if you had asked me this question last year, I would tell you we're living in the end of shame. There is no more shame, right? Trump is not ashamed of things. He operates differently. And if journalism, if you think of the Gary Hart era, literally, we're like, were you near a woman? and that can be your downfall, right? That's a completely different environment. This year and this week feels like the first moment I've really seen a return to that old conceptual backlash system, right? The Pope Leo is wildly popular. I mean, his approval ratings were plus 46. You know, it's just like people liked him. And Eric Swalwell all of a sudden got caught up in an old-fashioned sex scandal of the kind that I even thought post Me Too would not happen again. Because after the Me Too movement, you know, all the manosphere was like, oh, but our reputation, this is unfair due process, Johnny Depp is free. And now, so I was like, oh, that's over. You can kind of do what you want. I mean, you fight it in court, you have the conversation, but it's this whole idea that a woman could make an accusation and suddenly you're disappeared from the discourse, to me was sort of toast. And then comes this conversation this week. And even the Che Guevara conversation. So it's interesting. I don't have a good answer because I actually wonder if we're at a flex point where some of these things that we thought were gone, shame, backlash, consequence, maybe we're all a little fed up.
So even the pictures of President Trump as Jesus and then those go away, maybe there are some things which still do cross a line.
But even that he learned the hard way.
Right.
The story is not a story because Democrats think it's a wild picture. It's a story because right-wing marquee voices in the social media space said, what? Don't do that. And the Catholic leaders who he had sort of post-pandemic because of the church closures and because of the abortion issue, they said, don't do that. The Italian prime minister said, don't do that. And she loves him. And it happened the same week that Vance went to Hungary, where he did not help. So there is a little bit of like, we're actually starting to get glimmers of, is there a post-Trump? What is it? What were the Trump era rules that in the end actually only apply to him? That ain't going to work for you if you are not him. Some of that is sort of coming to the forefront now.
Another question related to that is the role of journalists as referee or people who provide context. So it used to be, once a time if somebody said something that was outrageous and wrong, you would report it that it was outrageous and wrong. The president says things over and over again which are repeatedly wrong. And I wonder how you feel about, to some people, the job of the press is to constantly remind people that they're wrong or out of context. And to some people, that when we don't do that, that's a failure. To other people, that plays as you're partisans. You can't keep doing that. And I wonder, especially as I ask you now about the war, because it seems to be a fact that the justifications for the war seem to shift. So as a journalist, is it the journalist's job to remind people this is a new thing, it's different than we heard the last time, or should that just be washed? We've done it once, let the viewers decide.
No, you still do that. But, before we came down here, we went and looked at the Murrow papers upstairs. And after his McCarthy speech, there were plenty of people who wrote to the businesses that were advertising to say, he is biased. He is a commie. Why do you have someone speaking this way? This is not objective. And that was then, you know what I mean? And this is a person we hold up as a model. He still got the same criticism. I do think that television bears some responsibility for this. And I'd love to hear your opinion, because I think you were frankly there during the period where infotainment became a kind of default setting. And when those lines blurred, I do feel like the truth-telling role, let's just say it democratized it. So now it's just as effective for a comedian to do it than one of us. And if they can do it, that's way more entertaining than I'm doing it. But then you lose something there. There's a rigor you lose.
I remember talking to Tim Russert about this. So if you remember Tim Russert, always Meet the Press, those of you might remember that show. And Tim would always try to make a big point of having someone on and saying, once upon a time you said this, and now you said that, and ask him to square it, right? Which not a lot of people did. And asked him sort of his thought process. And one is I was sort of trained your job is to objectively say, how can I respectfully challenge someone and look at the record? But the other reason I do it, he said, is because for whatever reason, conventional news doesn't do it. The pace of the evening news is so fast all the time that it's always on to the next thing. And he said, who really does do it really well is Jon Stewart. Now, Jon Stewart always did it in a very funny way, but he was constantly doing and it was funny because he would do it so well and edit it together so skillfully. But in some ways, that was journalism. It was funny. It did give people a sense of the record that I think just in the one of the things we talked about, the Murrow papers we saw and the McCarthy papers. And for those who've never been through this, when Murrow is lionized for calling McCarthy to task, and he does it by simply taking McCarthy's things and playing them so people can hear them. But what follows is 3 weeks of telegrams back and forth, whether McCarthy's going to answer, whether he isn't, who's going to pay for the studio. 3 weeks. And I think with the world we live in, 3 minutes people are responding. So I think it's also the pace is so frenetic. Even in your career, haven't you noticed how the pace
Not
is?
just the pace, he had to negotiate his response.
Right.
No one needs to do that now. They just pop up online, make their own video, comment further, deny what you've said, say that you misconstrued it. There's a lot that can happen now. They don't need that gatekeeper role. People forget it was a literal gate.
Right.
Okay. He had control of his microphone. That's done. Now, that doesn't mean it solves things. Just ask Swalwell. He put out a video. Did that help? Not really. But it means that there's not going to be this negotiation there. People are far more likely to be more combative, stand their ground, double down, triple down. I mean, half of our interviews, one of the reasons why you're even able to say the administration has had shifting responses is because people keep asking the question. Why are we doing this again? Why are we doing this again? You said, even though remember, they tried to make it in particular a more friendly press environment for the Pentagon specifically. And the press that was still there from publications that would be deemed friendly was, why are we doing this? What is the imminent threat? What's going on? So I would say we still do ask the questions. We still do it. We still push. But I guess it's very hard for me to be nostalgic about the times it was better. because I feel like that is the most journalist game in the world. It was always better 5 years before you started. It's just one of those things. Each generation, like, it comes with its own complexities.
And and I can think of all ways in which it was not better. There are many ways. One was the restrictive way in which you controlled what got in the air and when it got in the air. I think it's how long it took. I mean, people forget that in Vietnam, the video you saw was 1 or 2 days old. So it's how long, now you can broadcast from your phone. I think there are a lot of ways in which things are better.
Yeah, and still complexities. Vietnam, certain coverage got out that changed the course of the war. If you think of the Iraq War and the run up to the Iraq War, did everyone ask the questions that they needed to ask? I'm not sure. We think that now. And what does it mean to be embedded, right? To be embedded with the military and do that coverage? There are pros and cons to that. So I think that there's I know everyone likes to be like capital T, the era of Trump. I absolutely understand that because there were a lot of things that felt so jarring or so different. But I don't think the country is divided because they actually are trying to reckon with that, not because they have acquiesced to it.
Right. And I guess the question is, would the country be divided? Is the fact that media is where it is a result of a representation of a divided country, and/or has the media helped to contribute to the division in the country?
I don't know, maybe that's an internet thing. Some things I lay at the feet of social media. Having come up in the age where, like, I had a Friendster, shout out to Friendster, shout out to Black Planet. I got like my roommate and all my furniture on Craigslist, which I think now people think is like where serial killers hang out. There were a lot of promises made about what the internet would be and how it would inform us and bring us together and create community and allow people who were struggling to meet other people who were struggling. And it was going to be a big, big utopia. And I think all of our skepticism around AI is a result of the promises broken. We now all look at that and say, y'all didn't cure cancer. There aren't fewer school shootings because kids have more friends. There isn't less homophobia, or there isn't what? None of it worked out the way you said it would. I can get tacos delivered. That's great. But it didn't quite work out the way it was advertised. And I do think one of the things it did was completely pulverize monoculture. It is divisive. Filter bubbles are real. The algorithm is real. I don't think we have benefited from algorithmic information distribution. That's my bias. And they're all going to reckon with that now. They just had their first lawsuit from parents, right? That was successful with, this is important, a jury. That's us who feel differently. So yes, it's the media's fault, but I actually think it's social media and internet companies moving fast, breaking things, not taking responsibility for what's been broken, and now they have a higher hill to climb.
So once again, on the notion of better or not, another thing that's different is years ago, you would write or publish, and you had very little sense about how people were consuming what you wrote, right? Even in all kinds. Now you can have unbelievable feedback in all kinds of numerical and data-driven ways.
Wonderful.
Right? About what you do.
It's amazing.
Right? You can know to the second where people find your story good or where they lost attention.
Yes.
Right? So tell me about the good side and the bad side of that.
Well, the good side and the bad side.
Let's start with the bad side. How annoying is it?
Let me start. Okay, so when you worked at a newspaper, especially a small paper, especially a local paper, it was very important because people could tell you to your face at your kid's football game, that story sucked. You know what I mean? Like, you read the mail. Okay, so there was a kind of dialogue that happened, and lots of people actually look at that being one of the issues around local news, that many people don't know a journalist anymore, right? They only know us through TV, and we know what Hollywood thinks of journalists. They think we're all paps because they're crazy. So there's that. There's a lost relationship. I actually really respected the way that social media allowed for the feedback. So I grew up in the era when the older journalists really hated hearing back from social media. But to me, it democratized it. I mean, that is why there was Black Twitter. Black Twitter and the Black community and how people spoke in barbershops. And I'm doing air quotes because every reporter sent their Black reporter to a barbershop during election time. That is how they got to it. I went to a newsroom, my first job, I scanned the Rolodex and it said Black voices and there was one preacher in Boston, of course.
Right.
And so this sense that you just didn't have to hear from people was like pretty ingrained. Like people, they were kind of okay with that. And all of a sudden to have people just respond and for that response to be picked up and to collect momentum and to move. And then all of a sudden you're in a campaign, right? Hashtag activism. That was fascinating. That was to me fantastic feedback for newsrooms. They were hearing constantly about what they weren't covering to an insane degree. I mean, the kinds of things, like you could cover something about like dog catchers and someone will be like, well, you really missed that story about the blah, blah, blah. And you're like, it's about a dog catcher. Like everyone feels like they want to tell you. And I feel like the real concern is when they stop talking to us, because then we don't matter. It is the way I know it matters, because this is one of the few jobs you can have other than lawmaker where people feel perfectly comfortable walking up to you and telling you what a shit job you're doing. I can't do that. I can't find you at the insurance office and be like, and another thing. But people can do that to me. My work is public. My work is in dialogue with the audience itself. It's in dialogue with what's happening in the culture. And that feedback is really important. So does it come with some other things? Racial slurs, insults, stalkers, just, getting doxxed, all the things. But that's part of the work.
Here's another part of the work, and I don't know if you see this in your current job, but I know your bosses do, right? So you can get a report sort of second by second what you're doing, right? And you can see the audience traction up and down, right? Some people find that useful. If I'm losing people, I want, right? And some people like, I don't want to be judged by, I fell 10%, 14 seconds, and it's a larger narrative I'm telling. How do you view that?
That's a format thing. So I take that data, because I was very afraid to come to television, right? With radio, we were quite spoiled. We didn't quite have the granularity of data that a Nielsen's had, and even that by today's standard is really nothing. And so I felt very like I secretly didn't want to know, you know what I mean? Like if people were turning off the radio. I have come to really love and enjoy that data. And I think as long as you don't you can let it guide you without letting it rule you. So what I try and do, and I told the students this earlier, is put myself in the seat of the user. So when I'm scrolling, I'm ruthless. I'm like, it's taking too long. So now I'm more respectful of, depending on the format, how I deliver it. Because I'm like, I got to make something that I would use and acknowledge that, I don't make documentaries. I don't watch that many documentaries. Like that's not my metabolism. For someone else, that is a thing, that they can do and love. And one of the best interviews to have is with Ken Burns. He's a fantastic person to talk to, but like, that's not my ministry.
Right.
I move a little faster. Do I want to talk as fast as some of the newsfluencers do on TikTok? No. That's not for me. Nor do I think that that's part of that's a comprehensive news experience. I think it's one piece of many things you're taking in. But I definitely realize that for some people it's important. When I do the morning news, I do a social media recap. And when I first did it, I was just like, hi guys, like I did the influencer thing. Hi guys, news is starting. And then people were commenting and I was like, oh, holy shit, this is their news report. I actually have to put something, this has to be edible. And so now it's completely different. Like I do sometimes before, here's what we're talking about on the show today. Here are the big questions driving the day that you're going to hear more news about later. Sometimes I do it after. Hey, everybody, here's what we learned today. In Iran, but da, 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 da. In this, da, 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 like I give a little report. Is that report as fulsome as the hour-long show with multiple dialogues and multiple voices and subject experts? No. But for the person who's getting it that day, I'm still going to make it something that is journalistically sound.
I want to take you through your career a little bit, but this is where I know talk a little bit about now the difference about being on television versus being on radio versus the fact that people can either see you or see you and hear you.
Yeah, that sucks.
And does that make a difference how they relate to you?
It was better when they couldn't see me. The problem is the business has changed. One of the reasons why I made these moves is because the business was changing and I didn't want to be left behind. When I came onto the job, Robert Siegel was still anchor of all things considered, and like he celebrated his 37th year. And I was 30 years old taking on the job. So I'm not going to beat this guy. You know what I mean? Like he's literally been doing it longer than I've been alive. So I had to find my own way. And at a certain point, I realized like, oh, this podcast thing seems kind of real. We should take it seriously. And now at CNN, it's the same version of it. Oh, we should do video podcasts? Well, how is that different from TV? What is a podcast anymore? Is it a low rent TV show? You know what I mean? Is it like what? And I've come to understand it doesn't matter. So I was telling the students earlier that mostly I approach a story via its content. This is the story. This is the fuel and the engine. I am the engine. Now we have to figure out how many places is this gonna go? The max version of that I've done was a long form interview with Jacinda Ardern, who is the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, about a documentary. I go have a long conversation with her. We cut that into a documentary about 45 minutes. So it's a little doc about the big doc. Then I take a version of that, another 35 minutes, and that goes to the podcast. Has a different introduction, why we're talking about how we're going to talk about it. For YouTube, we shot things in the field to break the fourth wall. So I could be like, hey, I just asked this question. And what was interesting about that moment, because I understand people's attention span is different. And every few minutes, I have to say, stay with me, stay with me. And we tried to find a fun way to do that. Then it got cut for socials, different socials for TikTok, different socials for Facebook, different socials for LinkedIn. The LinkedIn people got the leadership bits. The socials people got the mommy stuff about the work balance kids, The like, you know, everyone got a bite of this very big apple. And then finally, I brought a section of it that was semi-provocative to my panel for live television in the morning. And they all chatted about the thing. Each one of those things, I had to think differently about how to introduce the audience to it, why I was introducing the audience to it, and what they should get out of it. And I don't know if it was worth it at all, but it was part of me learning to answer the question you're talking about. How do you do this in so many places?
And back to you again now that you are on camera, right? And so people now see you and hear you. Do you think that results in the fact that people think they know you better or have a different relationship with you?
It's tough because NPR, people really feel like they know you. I mean, like you can just do the voice. You know what I mean? You can be like, hi, welcome to All Things Considered. And the pacing, the intimacy of it, you might not hear a voice in fidelity in that way, except for your partner. That close and at that volume. TikTok and all that stuff, and even TV, I feel like I'm shouting. I have an anchor coach and he's just like, just be at one with the fact that your version of loud is not that loud. And coming from radio, you know, we used to make fun of the TV people. We would literally be like, why are you shouting?
And to be honest, we used to make fun of the radio people.
Yes, exactly. It's just like, it's a $10,000 microphone.
Right.
We caught it. But now I am much more aware of like playing to the back of the house, you know, and I think a lot about what comes across when the sound is off. Because I remember plenty of times CNN is on in the airport, in the dentist office, and you're like, what are they talking about? And all you have to go is the chyron and the body language. So now I'm in a completely different sense. I've been actively working on this the last 8 weeks. What am I conveying with my body? What I used to do in radio, a certain calmness, doesn't work. It comes off as bored, it comes off as disinterested, it comes off as somehow not caring. And so trying to convey curiosity and we're not sure, and maybe like there's such a more performance to it that I really didn't appreciate until I had to start doing it.
You know,
And
like
yeah,
there's this phrase in TV, you have to work on your resting face, right?
and mine was a resting bitch face. I truly was like, I'm just trying to get through this. And also the more serious the breaking news, the more calm I would be. You know, that was some sort of training I had done to myself over time, where it was like, okay, we are going to get through this. And I would kind of, it looked low energy, but it was really me calming myself so I could deliver the news still fairly, still objectively. And I had been trained with people who are like, they don't need you to cry, they're crying. They need you to get through it. And so to come into television where there is much more of an element of you performing the audience I don't know if I'm doing it well or right. And I'm sure the audience will tell me, the data points will tell me soon enough.
And the other, which is different, we talked about this also, is the difference between having graphics and video, which is your companion when you're on television.
Yeah.
Right. And what drives what. Right. It reminds me of Murrow. So Murrow became famous as a radio reporter. And this is London and the reports about the war when he described everything. And you heard the sound of people scampering because there was no video for it. Yet he goes on to do things like the documentary about the migrant farm workers. And the video is incredible. It's less of him, incredibly compelling. And he doesn't have to describe it because you see it. But his words are less and have to serve the pictures more.
Yes. And the thing I say is everything on the plate has to be edible. So if it's something I'm seeing, why am I seeing it? How does it help? It's not just there to be, a term I learned recently, wallpaper. And I was like, if it's wallpaper, why are we showing it? Show something that is helpful. Audio is different. Audio is about ideas and companionship and a relationship with the audience. If you're playing something for them, you really want them to hear it. You can play it almost a beat longer than feels normal or comfortable. We joke that you want to make people look at the radio, and when something, it changes the pace and texture of the conversation to slow down, to get quiet, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, now we're tight, you know, and then there's laughter. So it's much more tactile. I'm using the wrong words for the wrong senses. That's how jumbled up it is in here. I somehow feel the texture with audio and the rhythms of it. Whereas with television, sometimes you're up against just the tide of the requirements.
Something else that is different in these two careers. You worked for NPR, National Public Radio, public media. There were times where either you said, or we're going to cut away now, let our local stations talk to you.
And I worked at local stations.
So,
That's where I started.
You've watched them ask for money, right? And now you work for CNN, a commercially driven company, where they pay bills by commercials and subscriber fees, but you're not actually asking anybody for money. Any thoughts about that?
Well, my main thought is that hilariously, we're all public media now, because what are people doing in their Substacks? Hi, guys. If you could just subscribe for a month, I mean, they might as well give out tote bags. Right. So I actually feel like uniquely ready and positioned for this brave new world of begging for money directly. I do think the idea about corporate media overlords who dictate what you're doing to the newsroom is wildly overblown. But I also have only worked in one newsroom. So I can only talk about CNN, and I've not worked for anyone at CNN who has said to me, I don't think the advertisers would like that, like it happens on one of these like weird TV shows about journalism. That's just not how it works. There are limitations that you put on yourself or that come down inadvertently for different reasons. Number one, legal. People are very litigious against news organizations. If you say something, like people will sue you. And in that way, news organizations can be cautious. Okay, so there's one. There's way more legal support at CNN, right, than there was at NPR, but way more lawsuits against CNN than at NPR. There are time constraints. I don't think people understand how much we're battling clocks for maybe those advertising that you're talking about. But, you know, at NPR, we used to cut off people all the time and people would be like, why'd you cut them off? And it's like, we're going to go off air in a second. You know what I mean? Like there's no choice. So I think that there are things that are differences that actually are very sort of boring and pragmatic about the formulas more than the way it's sometimes depicted in films where like, you know, the family in Succession is choosing the election or something like that. I'm kind of like, well,
that doesn't happen.
I don't really think that's how it works, but I don't want to speak for everyone.
Do you think, and I've heard this said, that radio is just more comfortable with abstract ideas than television?
Yeah, it's completely idea driven. Completely idea driven. It's amazing. There's so many ideas I cannot do on television because what would they show? There's not really a good way to show the idea. That's why I'm envious of like SNL, because sometimes the crux of the joke is actually an idea. And through the combination of the dialogue with the audience, the cultural awareness that makes the joke work, a bunch of ideas can be conveyed, you know, with very little, like an eyebrow being raised. I just feel like sometimes, yeah, there are ideas that I just like, we can't do it. And then there's some things now that the audio team is cutting for video. We've moved to we used to do dual cuts. We'd like cut an audio piece and then cut the video piece. And now we're doing one cut. And it's funny, we've all started to play with it more. We've been like, oh, let's show this. Let's show that. Oh, that'll be cool. And it's its own, and the visual language is its own language as well, especially in the era of social media where you can kind of have these pop-ups all the time. And so it has its own language, which is really fun.
Do you think the arc of your career, and you know, often great storytelling is about arcs, right? You go to print, then radio, then television, is like the perfect arc?
No, it's more like an Indiana Jones where you're running from the boulder. It's that. It's every time, because I could have gone to the AP and been like, I'm going to work at the AP for the rest of my life. I'm going to work at a Boston news organization for the rest of my life. Like I'm a Boston girl, you know what I mean? I could have just worked at the Globe and worked here and worked there and just like never left the State House. That was a good gig covering same-sex marriage, sex abuse scandal. There was a presidential candidate. There was the Big Dig. There was literally no reason to leave Boston. It was a fantastic news town. And that class, David Muir, Rick Klein, all kinds of journalists in Washington came out of that Boston window of news. But I think that each time I was very aware of a kind of ticking clock, you know, and with radio, it came with podcasting of me looking around and being like, well, wait a second. They're out there talking this way and why am I cosplaying as Robert Siegel? Like, what am I doing here? You know, when someone else is out there getting paid to be what I am right now. You know, why am I in drag being an adult when I'm 25? Like, it forced me to make decisions. And even though I was at NPR for a long time, I actually did new jobs every 2 to 3 years. Like I went to a politics team, right? I like was covering Congress for a while. I did an election for a while. And then I started doing weekend hosting. Then I started doing arts interviews. Like every few years, I would sort of pout and tantrum and demand to get into a new job. And I actually love telling this story because I'm petty. I was never promoted. Like I was a reporter and I asked to be correspondent and they were like, no, you can't cut it. And then I ended up being an anchor, right? Like it doesn't make sense sometimes. Like the job isn't always gonna work out the way you think. The path isn't gonna work out the way you think. And coming to TV, I came to CNN to do CNN Plus digital. I literally I was like, as long as I'm not doing a morning show or something like that, that would be crazy, right? Like, I'm going to do this brave new world of digital. Well, guess what? It's happening. It's happening right now. I have shows in 3 formats. I am doing digital. Audie Shapiro, we just announced today, is going to come co-host a show with me that we're going to doing the same thing we always joked we hoped we would do 15 years ago. The path was not straight. It just wasn't. The path wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And there were risks and there were failures. And I think that's why the good news is that you can make into an arc, that you can make into a story. But when you're in it, it doesn't feel that way, right? When you're in it, you're like, what am I doing?
So I don't use the failure word, but were there things that in that progression we've talked about that did not go well as you wanted?
Well,
What did
how
you
come
learn
you
from it?
don't want to use the failure word? Tell me about your fears about failure.
I didn't want to impose my fear on you.
Yeah, no, I'm curious.
No, I think I felt lots of times.
Yeah.
Right. But I don't want to impose that on other people. Say, oh no, that wasn't fair. That was a misstep.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want.
No, all journalists fear failure.
Yeah.
That's how we thrive.
Yeah. But what have you learned? Name one thing that did not go as well you would have liked, and what did you learn from it?
Oh my God, so many things. I mean, my first job out of college, I wanted to be at NPR and I wasn't. I was at the AP in Boston, living in my parents' house with my dad driving me to the overnight shift. That's not what I planned.
Mm.
I was going to go to New York and like work at Gawker and like be all my cool friends. And I was not. I was joking with the students earlier about the like rejection is redirection type argument, that those things that were missteps, they really did help me. They really did help me. I mean, you learn, or you cut out for the thing you're trying to do. Is there another way to do the thing you're trying to do? And I just think as journalists, we're hard on ourselves. I mean, every single story I do every week for the podcast, I go, I wish I had done this other thing. And every day on the morning news, I think, we should have covered this other thing longer. Like, I actually don't walk away from any story and think that was awesome.
So give the audience a heads up.
Yeah.
We come to you in a minute. We're gonna do a quick lightning round.
I will lightning for real, I promise.
Ready? Okay. Worst or most challenging interview I ever did?
Worst.
Or most challenging?
Most challenging. I'm not going to say the name, but it was a very well-known movie director who was so rude that I actually started crying towards the end, and he made fun of me, and we never
Wow.
aired it.
All
And
right.
I will
Good for
never
you.
watch his films again. But then it never happened, and I remember at the time I was like, "There's a fucking war in Syria. This is bullshit. Who booked this for me?" Like, I was so pissed that I was like talking to this Hollywood doofus when like real news was going on. It's like made me so mad. Anyway,
Funniest interview I ever did?
Spike Jonze, another movie director, hugged me during the film tour for the movie Her.
Best interview I ever did?
Ta-Nehisi Coates, I've interviewed him a bunch of times, and each and every time, he's one of the few people who's willing to think in public. And by that, I mean the act of thinking, a pause, a sigh, a turn of the head. He actually is willing to do something that is quite vulnerable and very hard to do. Second runner-up, LeVar Burton, amazing guy, just like fantastic person who spent his whole life in dialogue with children and parents, and incredible guy.
Interview that most touched me?
There was this little kid in New Orleans. She was like 6 or 7. I don't know how old she is now. And her family had to move to Houston and then come back. And the New Orleans school system, for all intents and purposes, had been washed away with the flood. They redid the system into an entire thing of charter schools. But what it meant was just like, just imagine you're like 7, you know what I mean? You've had this like extremely traumatic experience through friends and family, and she was just like, she didn't want to be there anymore, And she's like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to be in Houston. Like, just this little pout. And like, now that I have kids that age, I really feel stories about kids way more acutely. I mean, in a way that has made it harder to do the job. Because I can picture it.
Yeah.
So I would say that is still sticks with me. And I've done a lot. I've done so much disaster coverage. I've done a lot, but yeah.
Let's go to open up for a few questions if we can. If you raise your hands, we'll have a mic. Sir.
Thank you. Oh, first and foremost, honored to meet you. I grew up
Nice.
listening
Can
to
you
you.
say your name?
My name's Nathaniel Kennedy. I'm a senior here. I'm wondering, you've been in reporting a while, and I wonder, like, have you ever like thought about leaving? Have things ever started to feel old? Like, as you've been in news for a while. You just said you've done so much disaster coverage, and I wonder, like, has it felt ever like things have gotten repetitive? And
Yeah,
have you ever
yeah.
considered leaving the industry? And
No,
why
I
have you stayed in?
usually just change jobs. Like when you're in something too long and you start to be that person that's like, no, he did that 3 years ago, like you should go. And I always would change jobs when I really felt like there's nothing more for me to learn and things are starting to feel repetitive. Now, there's some people who really actually don't mind that and they dig deeper into something and they become incredible beat reporters and they have just like incredible knowledge in one thing. And I'm not good at that. I do get bored. So even doing this now is fun because it's like something I haven't done before. It's like, yes, have I covered some of these stories? Sure. Have I covered them live in an hour with multiple, you know what I mean? Like I've found a way to make it interesting. But always beware when you start to think you know how a story should go. If you're not curious anymore, you're dead in the water.
Next question. Right, no, now we're right here, sir.
Kent Greenwald, member of the neighborhood, married to an alum. Since things don't stay the same, the American soul is either going to get a little bit sicker or a little bit better. Do you accept media and journalism's role in that? And I ask it in the way of accept because media will play its part, whether you accept it or not. And is your view that you're simply there as reporters, or that you can or should help lead us back to a better
Help
place?
lead. Help lead. That's an interesting question, an interesting point. So one thing I do want to quibble with the idea of accepting or not accepting. If there's one thing that journalists are well acquainted with, it's people telling us how we are either living up to or failing democracy at any given time. That's built in. We talk about it with each other. That dialogue is perpetual. So I don't want people to come away with some thinking that we're just like, la-di-da, let's do some stories and the democracy will figure itself out. No, we're in an active conversation at all times. In terms, I don't know if I totally understand your question, but I will say that it feels like, yes, we should be involved in that. Also, and the voter has to be involved in that. I think Hungary is a very good example. So many things there were organized in such a way for the people in power to maintain power. And yet, here we are all these years later, 12, 13, 14 years later, and people rejected that. It was built up over time through journalist organizations, through activists, through a number of things. But the landslide was irrefutable. And I do think that I understand people feel helpless right now. I see a lot of that in social media. I see a lot of people coming up to me, telling me, I'm just not watching the news right now. It's too stressful. I can't take it. That's also an abdication. I don't know if that answers it, but yeah.
And
Hello, my name is Aline Chaufin, and I guess, so I'm a senior, and what I see is that people my age, we don't watch the news. And I guess my question to you is, what do you think that news is lacking, and what is not on there that, and why is it not attracting people my age?
I think the news represents the social contract in a lot of ways. It's reporting and talking about things that are part of the social contract that this generation feels has been fundamentally broken. That they don't feel like they've been handed an environment that has been taken care of. They don't think they have been handed an economy that they can actually thrive in. And so how is it relevant to you? Now, if you have a 401k and you're suddenly one of the 401k millionaires in this country, because we know boomers and Gen X are holding all the wealth, yeah, watch the news. That's relevant to you. You know, those stock fluctuations, they're relevant to you. You have stocks. I think for young people who feel locked out of the job market for a variety of reasons, are even struggling in relationship to each other, especially in hetero gender divide, there's nothing for us to offer you because we're talking about a world that doesn't feel like it exists for you anymore. You know what I mean? So I respect that. I totally get why somebody would be like, I'm tuned out of that. The flip side is you're also abdicating and rejecting the ability to have a say in the society that you will inherit. You have to find a way in or make a way. That is also a way it can happen. And that's what I see in like TikTok influencers and stuff like that. There are people out there who are doing journalism in a way that I can see is very much about dialogue and making something that people like them would actually care about. But I don't think, I'm not like, I didn't look to the Murrow generation for news that was relevant to me. What story did he have to tell me? You know what I mean? Or even coming up in journalism when it's, you know, the way it is now, 3 white guys behind a desk. What story do they have for me and my community? So I'm trying to make a way. But I hear you. I hear you, and I you know, accept that criticism for sure.
Audie is a morning person. We have time for one more question, and I promise her.
I'm also like long-winded. It's bad. Sorry.
So I mean, one more question. How's this gentleman right here?
I'll do both of you. So that's
All right,
last
2 more
one.
questions,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
that's it.
Yeah. I'm curious how you see the rise of so-called alternative media. You know, when you see reporters like asking the president, did you catch the football game last night? You know, seeing the rise of these organizations and how much attention they're given and also how much people trust them. What do you view as your role as someone in, you know, legacy media, when there's so many organizations that just, you know, aren't telling people the facts or telling people what they want to hear?
I mean, there was a period in this country of yellow journalism, like the people who we lionize as investigative reporters were seen as agitators and advocates. Like this part of the conversation is not that different. I think what's different is attention economy, attention economics. I have actually more of a question, which is like, what happens to that world with AI? Like, can't I build a Mr. Pillow guy? You know what I mean? Like, can't I make a version of a person who tells me things in a certain ideology down the line, especially if they don't deviate really? So I'm kind of curious what happens to them as the honestly tidal wave of content starts to swallow some things up. I actually feel weirdly bullish about legacy journalism in a way that I didn't used to, because as a consumer, I have found myself behaving differently. So very quick example, the Met Gala. The Met Gala happens every year. Well, the last 2 years, there's always a bunch of pictures that are fake. And so what do? I go, oh, I can't deal with this. I'm going to go to Vogue. I'm going to go to, you know what I mean? Like, I know there's like a handful of publications. I'm like, you exist, you're real, this is verifiable. That's where I'm going to go, because why would I look at the upteenth fake photo of like a person who wasn't even there that year? And so I do feel like if we can protect it, you know, if we can find ways to watermark or do whatever, the technology, in a way, people will say, if it's breaking news, we're going to go to CNN. Why would I trust a flood of random images on social media that are constantly wrong? You know, here's a picture of a battlefield or deaths from 3 years ago, no 2 years ago, no 18 months ago, no a different country. Its utility has really suffered in the last 2 years in particular. So I don't know if that's helpful, but like that's how I think of it. We're not gone yet. Just like radio in the end wasn't gone. I thought I was going to be the last radio reporter alive. Literally, I was a dinosaur looking over my shoulder saying, what is that light coming towards me? And then over the years, everyone and their mother started doing radio on demand. They wanted more of it. Now it's like we're drowning in it. I mean, tariff on mics, right? Like it's a lot. And it didn't go anywhere. So I kind of have hope. No matter what we do, all we do is want to hear each other tell stories. Like that's crazy. But like that is the human condition, is like being in dialogue.
And one more plug for my own team. The Roper organization does a poll every year, 18 years in a row. The most trusted organization in America is PBS.
You get the last question.
I'm Cape Verde now, I don't need a mic, but Paul Paris, I'm from the South Coast, which is outside of the wall of Boston, originally. But I've been at
Randolph.
Yeah, that's why
Okay.
when I found out, I was shocked. I came here as a huge fan, first of your voice. It's very melodic, it's very common. I used to listen to it on the radio a lot, headphones on, 5-mile walks along the store drive. And then my question comes from the first time I saw you on a panel on CNN.
And you're like, she's black?
But no, I have this huge pet peeve when I watch these panels because I want to see debate. I want to see diversity and debate so we get to an answer. And every time I'm watching CNN, I'll name one person only, Scott. I saw you, I do this thing when somebody's talking while I'm talking, you know, and you're in the middle of responding to an answer to a question, you're saying something, and he's talking the whole time you're talking, and you held your patience to the point of where he realized his method wasn't working. How do so many of these people allow the GOP side to overtalk people? I see other journalists get frustrated.
Let me answer your question, I think, and there's a way to answer it in a nonpartisan way, which is to say that as someone who is currently doing a panel show, again, it is not, I would say it's not always built for dialogue. It is built for the performance of dialogue and the performance of argument, if that makes sense. So there's a little bit of, I'm saying this out loud because you should hear this point of view. And then someone else says something out loud to hear this point of view. And one of the things I had to teach my panels when they came on is I had to say, I'm actually listening to you. I'm not looking off. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like, I'm like, yeah, say more. And so there are some aspects of what is considered the modern political panel show that are structured much more in a way to perform the points of view for people to see and to perform resolution for people to see. And as much as people complain about that format, they watch it.
I mean, I watch it because
regularly.
you're amazing.
No. I mean, like, it's not, these shows are popular. And this is the thing about the audience. The audience will sometimes tell you in very lofty ways what it wants, and that's not what it clicks. And I don't think it's an accident that last year's word of the year was rage bait.
Wow.
So some of us, I think, have to reckon with ourselves as consumers and be a little more honest about what we're consuming and what we're rewarding, and a little less critical of the supply and demand. Because I can tell you, if all of a sudden everyone started watching me in the morning because they just love the courteous dialogue, you'd see 10 more shows like it.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. It's a lot like movies, right? You're all into horror right now. We're getting a lot of horror movies. When you are into something else, we'll get that. But don't abdicate your responsibility as a consumer of media, because your attention is the actual value right now. Like, that is the thing. And sometimes people, they give it up too freely, if that makes sense.
To make it wrap it, as we talk about Murrow, for those who've seen his famous documentary McCarthy, it ends where he quotes Shakespeare and the line that the fault is not in our stars, it's in ourselves. Good to end with Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Please thank Audie Cornish
Thank
for
you,
joining us.
guys.
Thank you.